There is a stretch of redwood forest in Northern California, roughly 70 miles from San Francisco, that you cannot visit, cannot photograph, and, if you ever did manage to get inside, could not legally write about afterward, even if you wanted to. For 2 weeks every July, around 2,500 of the most powerful men in the world gather there. Former presidents, cabinet secretaries, Fortune 500 CEOs. The waiting list to join the club that owns this land runs 15 to 25 years. And by long-standing tradition, everyone who attends is asked to leave business outside the gate entirely. Nobody quite believes that's what actually happens. This is just one entry point into a much larger world, a network of private clubs scattered across continents that exist for golf, for dinner, for cigars, for absolutely nothing in particular, and that have, almost as a side effect of their own design, become the place where an enormous amount of the world's most consequential business actually gets discussed before any lawyer, banker, or press release ever gets involved. Today, we're going inside that world, the real clubs, the real history, and the real mechanism by which a round of golf or a quiet dinner becomes the opening move in a deal worth billions. If this kind of insider deep dive is your thing, subscribe now. This channel goes inside the real architecture of wealth and influence every single week, well beyond the surface-level content most channels in this space settle for. Why the deal never starts in the boardroom. Here's the thing most people get wrong about how genuinely enormous business deals actually originate. By the time lawyers, bankers, and term sheets enter the picture, the real decision has frequently already been made. What lawyers formalize in many of the largest, most consequential transactions in business history is something that began far earlier, as a conversation between two people who already trusted each other in a setting that had nothing to do with business at all. This is the entire reason elite private clubs matter to the story of how serious wealth actually moves. They're not transactional venues. Nobody walks into Augusta National or the Bohemian Grove to pitch a deal directly. That would be considered, in these circles, a genuine social error, a violation of exactly the kind of old money discretion this channel has covered in previous videos. What these clubs actually provide is something more valuable and far harder to manufacture. Years, sometimes decades, of repeated low-stakes social contact between people who will eventually need to trust each other with extraordinarily high-stakes decisions. A modern industry analysis of why ultra-wealthy individuals join these institutions in the first place captures this precisely. The benefits aren't really about luxury amenities at all, but about networking opportunities, trusted introductions, and access to influential communities that simply cannot be purchased directly, no matter how much money is involved. Access has become one of the strongest indicators of influence in the world today, arguably stronger in certain circles than wealth itself, because access depends on relationships built over years, while wealth alone can be acquired comparatively quickly. This is the mechanism worth understanding before we go inside any specific club. These institutions function as trust-generating machines, operating on a timescale, years and decades, that no conference, no networking event, and no LinkedIn connection request could ever replicate. Augusta National, where golf is the cover story. Few institutions illustrate this principle more clearly than Augusta National Golf Club in Georgia, home of the Masters Tournament, and, by wide consensus, the single most exclusive golf club in the world. Augusta's membership process is, by design, entirely opaque. There is no application, no published waiting list, and no known path to candidacy beyond an invitation extended personally by the club's chairman. Historical and current membership has included Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, alongside generations of Fortune 500 chief executives and major financial figures, a roster the club itself has never officially confirmed or denied in any complete form. What makes Augusta genuinely significant to this video's subject isn't the golf course, magnificent as it is. It's the specific social function. 18 holes of golf serves that a boardroom simply cannot replicate. 4 uninterrupted hours away from phones, assistants, and the formal posturing of a business meeting, during which 2 or 3 people walk side by side, repeatedly across a shared physical experience. Industry commentary on elite golf clubs describes this directly. These venues function as ecosystems of influence, where business deals are quietly shaped over 18 holes, not because golf itself is strategically important, but because the format creates exactly the kind of sustained, unstructured proximity that produces genuine trust between people who might otherwise only ever meet across a negotiating table. This is also why golf, specifically, recurs so consistently across elite club culture globally, at Cypress Point, on California's Monterey Peninsula, at Liberty National overlooking the Manhattan skyline, at countless similarly exclusive courses worldwide. The game itself is almost incidental. What matters is the format it provides. The Bohemian Grove, the motto that everyone quotes and nobody quite believes. 2 weeks in the Redwoods since 1872. Founded in 1872 by a group of San Francisco journalists and artists, the Bohemian Club evolved over its first decades into something considerably more consequential than its bohemian origins might suggest, eventually welcoming presidents, cabinet members, and titans of American industry into its ranks. Its defining institution is the Bohemian Grove, a 2,700-acre private redwood encampment in Sonoma County, where roughly 2,500 members and guests gather each July for a 2-week retreat, combining theatrical performances, invited lectures, and a great deal of informal, undocumented conversation. The club's own motto, borrowed from Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, is direct on this point. Weaving spiders come not here. A formal instruction that outside business and political dealings should be left at the gate, with members traditionally expected to leave commerce behind for the duration of the encampment. And yet the Grove's actual historical record tells a more complicated story. Historical accounts have linked a pivotal 1942 conversation at the Grove to the early momentum behind the Manhattan Project, the wartime program that developed the atomic bomb. Richard Nixon, a member, is widely reported to have used a 1967 speech at the Grove to help launch the presidential campaign that would carry him to the White House the following year. Whether every such account is precisely accurate or somewhat embellished by retelling, the pattern itself is the point. A setting explicitly designed to exclude business has, repeatedly across its own documented history, become exactly the place where some of the most consequential conversations in modern American history actually took place. Privacy enforced by culture, not just by rule. What makes the Grove particularly instructive for understanding elite club culture more broadly is how its privacy is actually maintained. Photography, recording, and detailed written accounts of what happens inside are strictly prohibited, but more importantly, the culture of discretion among members has historically been almost entirely self-enforcing, without needing constant active policing. When your fellow attendees include former heads of state and the architects of national policy, the social incentive to maintain that discretion runs in every direction simultaneously. Everyone present has equally compelling reasons to want the same silence maintained. This single insight, that genuine secrecy in these environments, tends to be self-reinforcing rather than externally imposed, explains why so little reliable information about what actually transpires inside these institutions ever reaches the public, decades after decades, despite no shortage of public curiosity about exactly that question. Quick pause, drop a comment letting me know. Had you heard of the Bohemian Grove before this video, or is this your first time learning about it? I'm curious how far this particular piece of elite club history has actually traveled outside specialist circles. The City Club, where old money meets daily, not annually. The Knickerbocker Club, and the logic of the daily lunch. Not every consequential private club operates on the scale of a 2,700-acre summer encampment. Many of the most influential clubs in old money culture are considerably smaller, considerably quieter, and built around something far more mundane than an annual retreat. Lunch on an ordinary Tuesday, with the same small circle of people, repeated for decades. The Knickerbocker Club, founded in 1871 on Manhattan's East 62nd Street, exemplifies this model. Its historical membership has included Astors, Roosevelts, Rockefellers, and Vanderbilts, the core families of America's original old money establishment, and the club's admission standards have reportedly remained essentially unchanged across roughly a century and a half. Unlike the Grove's once yearly gathering, a city club like the Knickerbocker operates daily, providing the kind of recurring, almost ritualistic contact between its members that, compounded across years, produces exactly the deep, low-stakes familiarity discussed earlier in this video, the foundation every subsequent high-stakes conversation eventually gets built upon. This is precisely the institution this channel has referenced in earlier videos on old money social rules. The club as a daily habit, not a special occasion. Breakfast before the working day, lunch with contemporaries, an evening in a familiar leather chair among people who require no explanation of who you are or where you come from. The Bohemian Club's deliberately modest pricing and what it actually signals. Here's a detail about club economics that frequently surprises people because it inverts an intuitive assumption about exclusivity. The most prestigious clubs are often not the most expensive ones. Published reporting places the Bohemian Club's initiation fee at approximately $25,000, with annual dues in the range of $3,000 to $5,000. Figures that, while not trivial, are dramatically lower than what a determined, sufficiently wealthy outsider might expect to pay for access to a network, including Fortune 100 chief executives and former heads of state. Industry analysis of this pricing structure is direct about what it signals. The club is not designed to extract maximum revenue from its membership. The low dues to prestige ratio is possible specifically because the club is self-selecting at the invitation stage rather than the financial one, meaning the actual barrier to entry was never the initiation fee at all. It was and remains the invitation itself, extended only by an existing member willing to personally vouch for a new candidate. This is a genuinely important insight into how the entire ecosystem operates. At the most elite tier of private club culture, money was never really the gate. Trust, sponsorship, and decades of cultivated relationship were. The modern version Founder clubs built for the same purpose. Core Club, Zero Bond, and the New Old Money. It would be incomplete to discuss this world purely through its historical old money institutions, because the underlying mechanism, trust built through repeated informal proximity, eventually converted into business outcomes, has been deliberately and explicitly reproduced by an entirely new generation of clubs, built for an entirely new generation of wealth. Core Club, located on Manhattan's Fifth Avenue, spans 60,000 square feet, specifically tailored to chief executives, managing directors, and founders with a net worth of $50 million or more, charging membership fees reported around $100,000 annually. Its stated business edge is direct and explicit in a way the older clubs would never openly advertise. A concierge team specifically tasked with arranging introductions, often within 48 hours, connecting members directly with investors or strategic partners. Zero Bond, in Manhattan's NoHo neighborhood, admits only 200 to 300 new members annually from a membership base concentrated among technology founders, venture capitalists, and celebrity entrepreneurs, with admission requiring sponsorship from a member who has themselves belonged for at least a year, directly mirroring the sponsorship-based gatekeeping that has governed clubs like the Knickerbocker for a century and a half. What's genuinely revealing here is how closely these modern clubs have copied the old money template, almost feature for feature, invitation and sponsorship rather than open application, deliberate scarcity rather than revenue maximization, and an explicit understanding that the actual product being sold isn't square footage or amenities, but curated proximity to exactly the right people. A broader market analysis of this growing category notes that membership fees across these founder-focused clubs now range from roughly $2,000 at the most accessible tier to $200,000 at the most exclusive, with the more expensive tier specifically designed for founders who have already scaled past $50 million in annual revenue or successfully exited a company. Meaning, in practice, these clubs aren't selling access to opportunity so much as access to other people who have already arrived, which is precisely the same value proposition Augusta National and the Knickerbocker Club have offered for well over a century. If you found the parallel between these old money institutions and today's founder clubs as interesting as I did, share this with someone building a network of their own right now. And let me know in the comments which club from this video you'd most want to see covered in more depth. The actual mechanism. Why inefficiency is the entire point. Here's the underlying principle that ties every institution in this video together, and it's worth stating directly because it explains something that might otherwise look strange. These clubs are, by ordinary business standards, remarkably inefficient ways to do business. A 2-week retreat in a redwood forest, a 4-hour round of golf, a decades-long waiting list before even being considered for membership. None of this is the fast, efficient route to closing a deal that a direct introduction or a well-run conference might offer. That inefficiency isn't a flaw, it's the entire mechanism. A deal struck quickly between relative strangers carries real risk that the other party's character, judgment, and reliability haven't actually been tested under any meaningful conditions. A relationship built across a 15-year waiting list, years of recurring lunches, or repeated summers at the same encampment has been tested repeatedly in low-stakes settings, long before either party ever needed to trust the other with something that mattered. By the time a genuinely consequential conversation happens, quietly, on a golf course or in a clubhouse reading room. An enormous amount of due diligence has already taken place. Just not the kind any lawyer would recognize as due diligence. It happened over years of unstructured time, and it's precisely the kind of assessment that no background check, no reference call, and no formal vetting process could ever fully replicate. This is also why these institutions remain so deliberately resistant to anything that would make them more efficient or more accessible. A shorter waiting list, an open application process, a lower price point, any of these would solve the supposed inefficiency, while simultaneously destroying the actual value the inefficiency was generating in the first place. The waiting list isn't a flaw to be optimized away. It's the entire filtering mechanism doing exactly what it was designed to do. Let's bring this together. Augusta National's golf course, the Bohemian Grove's redwood encampment, the Knickerbocker Club's daily lunch table, and a new generation of founder clubs in Manhattan all solve, in different settings, exactly the same problem. How do you build the kind of deep, tested trust that an enormous financial decision actually requires in a world where most business relationships are formed too quickly, too transactionally, to ever generate that kind of confidence? The answer these institutions have converged on, independently, across more than a century and a half of history, is remarkably consistent. Deliberate scarcity, sponsorship instead of open application, and years, sometimes decades, of unstructured, ostensibly non-business contact, repeated often enough that genuine trust has time to form before it's ever actually needed. None of this requires any conspiracy to explain. The deals that begin in these rooms are real, but the mechanism behind them isn't secret coordination. It's simply patience, applied to relationship building, for far longer than most modern business culture has the structure or the inclination to sustain. That's the actual machinery behind the deal that supposedly began on the golf course. It didn't begin there. It began years earlier, the first time two people sat across from each other with absolutely nothing at stake. If this gave you a genuinely new way to think about how relationships and capital actually move in elite circles, subscribe now. We go inside the real architecture of wealth and influence every single week, with the kind of factual depth most channels in this space don't bother with. And if you want to understand exactly how these relationships eventually get converted into actual deal flow, go watch our video on private family offices. It's the natural next step after this one. Let me know in the comments which club in this video you'd most want to learn more about. I read every one. I'll see you in the next video.